Nana Adogagba Akufo-Addo, having been elected to the high office of the President of the Republic of Ghana.
Hello and good afternoon, and you're welcome to the Joy News channel on Multi TV. And it's a day where the Akufo-Addo government marks 100 days in office. And the big event today has been a special town hall with Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, where he's been taking questions from various identifiable groups, and some of you have also been sending your questions on the hashtag #AskBawumia, and some also send their videos. Well, that event is all over now, and we get to dissect the various issues that he raised. He talked about 103 promises delivered in 100 days. So that means 100 achievements within 100 days plus Jara. I guess Jara meaning extra in Hausa. Well, it's a Russian politician, Nikita Khrushchev, who said that politicians promise everything and anything, including to build a bridge where there is no river. So this opportunity to talk about the issues that Dr. Bawumia raised today also questions whether the NPP administration over the last 100 days has achieved the things it said it would. And this is Editors Forum. My name is Jifa Bampo, and I'm here with none other than Raymond Akwa, our chief fact checker, and also Malik Abbas Dabu, who is the editor for myjoyonline.com. So guys, you're welcome, and thank you for spending your holiday in the studio.
Tell Raymond to close his laptop.
That's okay. Let's allow Raymond to...
I took notes on the I took notes on the laptop.
All right, so interesting. Dr. Bawumia, the Vice President himself, terms it 103 achievements in 100 days, plus Jara. I guess the 3 is the Jara, which is the extra. So he took questions on topical issues, the economy, Galamsey, which has been, I guess, a really big issue for the current government. Also the payment of arrears, the payment of allowances as well. That also came up. So let me start from the far end with Malik. Your impressions, what was good, what wasn't?
I think it was largely a fabulous show put together by Joy News, much to our own credit. But it was also spectacularly well thought out presentation by Dr. Bawumia, which is not surprising because he's been doing this for a long time now. Anytime you put him out there, he delivers. And so all in all, I think it was a great program, great planning. Evans and Kojo, great questions, great moderation. It was all, I think it was fabulous. It was a great show for me. Raymond,
what about you?
It was excellent. I really think that, for example, it's in government's interest that the president and the vice president opens up more. What happened today, and I really believe that it should continue anyway, it's something that strengthened the democracy in the country. You are opening up the office of the vice president to questions from the government. So the governor is now being accountable to the people. And don't forget, this is not government put together. This is a media house saying that we want you to fulfill your constitutional mandate by opening up to the people and engaging, allowing for participation. We have seen what has happened in times of the People's Assemblies and all of the other things. So this was an excellent engagement with the people. I just wish it could continue on and on to like half of the day, because really, the people have questions, so many of them.
Okay, so it was...
If I just add to that, see, what distinguishes what happened today and what has happened in the past is, in the past, you have had cause to suspect that the whole thing is staged. This one, it was so natural, it was obvious to everyone that this is well produced, and it was natural. The flow was natural, the presentation was natural, the questions were natural, that it was not staged at all compared to previous such events organized by previous
where people tend to have a certain impression.
Maybe it's because this has been organized by a media house that has a reputation for being very independent and for doing the kinds of things for which we are noted. So maybe that has played a part, but generally this was obviously independent. It wasn't staged at all.
Raymond, you wanted to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say that perhaps going into the future, I think that even this says something very good about how government and the media can engage. They can engage fruitfully so that you bring the message of government to the people, so that the people believe that you have not orchestrated a grouping who are there to sing your praises, who are there only to create the impression that you have done all things well. On the other side, I think it was a very bold decision also on the side of Dr. Bawumia to agree to do this. He's in office, first 100 days. He's not been vice president before. He's engaged as running mate in times past. It will be a very strange thing, not knowing the kind of questions coming in, not knowing the kind of things that the people there are likely to ask you. And don't forget, some of these people also have PhDs and are very competent people. So I think it was a very bold decision for him to agree that I will subject myself to. I heard him say that he doesn't know, he was in a very good mood when he agreed to do it, but really.
He didn't know what was coming.
Yes, so not knowing what was coming, it's for government not something that they'll be willing to do ordinarily, because the surprises are likely to put him off. And if you put him off, it's actually putting government in bad light. So this is something that I think government did very well.
But Malik, just a quick one. There's also the question, Raymond talks about a relationship between the media and the government. But some may also be critical and say that we may be pandering to the government in office. We're trying to be nice or play Mr. Nice Guy and that kind of thing, and trying to use that, and maybe we are being used. What would you say?
Unless one is being overly mischievous and determined to parrot some propaganda. If you listen to the kinds of questions that were asked, you cannot come to any conclusion that somebody was pandering to him, because very critical questions were asked. And you see, unlike in times past when you have had to ask one question without an opportunity for a follow-up, this time around, he was virtually at our mercy, and you could ask whatever question you wanted to ask and follow up and press on and demand. And we saw that with both Kojo and Evans, asking him questions and demanding, and when he gives the answer and then you are not satisfied, they will go and ask a follow-up. That didn't happen in the past. If anybody watched this and still believes that this was staged and this amounted to multimedia pandering or Joy News pandering to the executive, the person must have a special brand of jaundice to come to that conclusion. And I wanted to add to what Raymond said about the arrangement. He was there, and you asked questions that he had no idea about, and clearly he admitted at some points that, okay, this one I don't have the information. Government hasn't averted its mind to this. So in his closing remark, he actually considered that this is useful for him, because going back to government and going back to meetings, he now carries with him things that they hitherto did not avert their minds to, but things which are important to their constituents and to the citizenry. So clearly, this was not staged, and it wasn't done to do anybody any favors. It was done because we believe that we have an obligation to, as you pointed out in your welcome address, to bring governance close to the people, so that the citizenry can put questions to the government and get answers to their questions.
And in fairness, you're very part two, and I don't know, but Jifa delivers wonderful speeches too. I was clearly interested in that part two. Yeah,
yes. A good chief of staff.
I'm not going to deliver that discussion. But I'm surprised that of you thought that this was too short.
Oh, I said it first.
No,
I said that it should drag for a longer time.
You just said it, but I think that for maybe that would have been the disappointment for many, that the program was too short. I don't know, give or take. It could also be that because this is the first time this is happening, the government team may want to, gauge the mood. Sometimes if something is too long.
Yeah. It lasted 2.5.
A little over 2 hours.
No, just about. It started really at 10:30, I must say, and we ended at 10 past
2 hours anyway.
10 past 12. Yes. Okay. So for some, and that's why I guess there was a lot of, I don't want to say disappointment, but the feeling that, well, I needed to ask a question. A lot of the reactions after, they didn't get to ask.
We're just having a discussion with Kofi Ansah, and we were raising the same question as to whether the time wasn't too short. Could we have done it? Could we have had a longer time to have a more deeper understanding and appreciation of the issues being raised. But of course, this is the first time, and I sense a certain hint in Dr. Bawumia's closing remarks when he said when he comes back here in a year's time. And I said, okay.
He's already committing us to that.
Absolutely,
so that
sounds interesting. So if he's coming back in a year's time, which is remarkable that in a year's time we did 100 days. So let's do 1 year. So we have 1 year, the government has been in power 1 year. There's a town hall meeting again organized by Joy News, time with Dr. Bawumia, the MPP in MPP's government in 1 year. It will be great discussion. And I believe that at that time we would have then scheduled a better time, recognizing that this time was far too short.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, I want to say that if we are not stretching this, it also says that maybe for the first time we should look at how some of these programs are organized in ways that are different. It was almost 2 hours, and 2 hours is a long time.
That's true.
I hope you get what I'm trying to say. There are a lot of questions even on the floor that were not taken.
Yes.
Assuming the external questions, which were supposed to be social media and other things, were also supposed to be exhausted. You see the amount of time we are going to deal with this particular matter. I think then we should look at subject area engagements. It would matter. So if it was the economy, we have a specific period, 2 hours for the economy. There may be a different day or a different time for other sectors, to the social sector and the other sectors. When you lump them together, then especially when currently security is a very big issue, it can take 1 hour of the entire discussion. The other sectors are sidelined indirectly or unconsciously. So maybe that's an area that I think will be more prudent going into the future.
We can look at, all right. So were all the questions, I don't know about all, but were the questions you were expecting to be asked, the Vice President asked Malik?
Obviously no, because there wasn't a question on corruption. We know that corruption played a big part in last year's campaigns. Dr. Bawumia himself consistently referred to corruption and stealing and wahala and all of that. And so it would have been nice if we had a question asking him, so far, within the 100 days, what have you done in terms of dealing with this monster which you consistently referred to during your campaigns? It would have been important to hear his views about that and whether enough has been done so far. Of course, he did mention that the special prosecutor will come, but that was just in his presentation. But as to questions, specific questions about what is being done about Bawumia and all of these, whether government is really doing much, we didn't get to ask those questions. And it was obviously because of time, because I'm aware that Kojo and Evans had slated those questions to be asked, but because of time, they couldn't be asked. So that's one big area that I thought we could have heard from him, but because of time, we couldn't ask.
Raymond, what about you?
Yes,
were the questions asked as expected, or you expected others that didn't get through?
I mean, his speech actually covered more issues than the questions asked, if you actually check.
Yes.
Of course, but he was also listening as if think government has actually done some things or are doing some things. So that's the difference in this particular case. I really feel that if it was categorized the way we thought it was going to go from the first we dealt with economy, then
so
was
we
moving
take some
into,
questions
yes,
on the economy,
very
take
good.
some
Then move
questions on Galamsey, take some questions on security.
The social sector, and I know the question about the health part, it was instructive for one particular reason. It was important to put that, and that's a very big area too anyway. You were talking about, the question was to do with how we are going to do a non-communicable disease and funding for that particular sector, mindful of the fact that we still have a problem to deal with NHIS more importantly. But I believe that the Vice President did get the opportunity to elaborate on government policy for the health sector. It doesn't look like, and I heard Nana Dankwa Akufo-Addo introduce Kokwaji Mamenu when he was being put out there. He said, go fix the problem with the funding of what the NHIS is. But
because he's an accountant.
Yeah, yes, but the problems of the health sector is bigger than the NHIS. I don't want to believe that the focus of government is really on what they call
just to fix the NHIS.
Disease surveillance alone is a very big thing. Mindful of the curve that we're taking, we are heading towards the time we'll be going to the rainy season. We need to be assured that we will not be having the cholera numbers we had in times past.
There are also allegations already that the yellow fever vaccines is in very short supply.
And we have not had conclusion of what is really going to happen to the central medical stores after the fires happened, after we lost 110 million worth of drugs or so. So all of those issues, to me, would have been putting a very important sector into the right perspective anyway. But any day, the NHI seems to be, but when we look at NHI, we're looking at preventive healthcare, what do they call it? Reactive healthcare rather, than the preventive part. It is not what we have done as a people, as a policy. He didn't say much about that. I remember the MPP introduced what they call some form of exercise under Courage Koshiga, the late. He called it, I've forgotten the exact name he gave it, but it was to say that when you do more exercising, when you eat the right food,
that the regenerative health?
Very good. It was to put in the right perspective.
Which is why I went to and stopped eating meat.
You also go to Dimona?
No, I didn't go to Dimona. I followed him to Ada.
Anas Arimeya went to Dimona. Matilda Sante went to Dimona. Elvis Kwashi himself went to Dimona.
Okay. And they changed.
They are still eating meat, I'm sure.
Okay, so I think that's one part that we sure would have heard more about. But secondly, he mentioned a lot on energy.
Okay. We'll come to the
There's a tussle on what they call Ameri that
we'll come to the nitty-gritties, but I just wanted to know from you, what question did you expect to be asked that maybe wasn't asked?
Okay, so specifically on the Ameri deal.
Okay, so
what government was going to do now, renegotiation done, that part I didn't get.
Okay. Yeah, but just to add on the questions, I think that I think Evans and Kojo had decided that they were going to tackle the questions area sector by sector. So they started with one sector and then they dealt with so they started with the economy and then they asked questions about what he said when he was in opposition, what he said about the economy, the CD, the taxes, tax cuts, and what do you call it, rationalization, the IMF and all of that. So the decision was to tackle the economy first and then probably move on to health and maybe education. But they realized that time wasn't on their side, so they had to cut the questions and then pick the question from the people who were gathered there. But I have to make this point. I think I felt proud just watching Evans and Kojo and the way they went about it and how they communicated, the way they laid out their questions, the way they related to each other, the way they moderated the whole thing. I think it was beautiful.
All right. And it's the Joy News channel on Multi TV. We are here on the Editors Forum. I'm here with Malik Abbas Dabu, who is the editor for My Joy Online. I am ignoring claim that they are up to the standard. And these days, standard is not, it's a very dangerous word. It's a very dangerous word.
They were not substandard.
And then, of course, Raymond Aqua, our chief fact checker, here with us. So we've been discussing today's town hall meeting with Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, 100 Days of Change, where he's been taking questions organized by Multimedia Group and Joy News. And you've heard a bit about what Evans and Kojo Yankson as moderators did at that event. Now let's hear a bit about what the Vice President, Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, says his government has managed to achieve in 100 days on the economy.
We were also a very high indebted country, and we began the process of reprofiling Ghana's public debt. As you know, the public debt ended at 122 billion Ghana cedis in 2016. And so we, as a matter of strategy, began the process of reprofiling our debt. This just means that we are replacing more expensive debt with less expensive debt, short-term debt with longer-term debt. This is what is happening. And so you saw that last Friday or so, Ghana issued a bond essentially to do this reprofiling. And in that context, we raised some $2.25 billion of investment that came in to buy this CD-denominated bond. There was a CD bond which was issued for 15 years tenor, 15-year tenor, and that brought in 2.25 billion. But what is so remarkable about this particular transaction, and I think it is, for me, the deal of the year so far.
You're welcome back. So you heard Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia, the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, talking about what they've done in 100 days in reference to the economy. Government has reprofiled Ghana's debt without incurring more debt. He says in less than 100 days, government has increased our reserves from $6 billion to $8 billion. That's our foreign exchange reserves. Inflation is down from 15.8% to 12%. And he also talks about a few other things in reference to that. So let me start with you, Malik. Impressive achievements, or they just did what was expected of them?
Well, it was nice listening to him.
Was it insightful?
It was, in my view. It took us away from the cacophony of the lawless acts perpetrated by some members of their party, because what has dominated the headlines and the news discussions have been the acts of these guys, those takeovers and the attacks and the ugly fights on the streets and all of that. Those have dominated discussion. So it was nice that he moved us away from that noise into what is being done in real terms.
It's interesting you mention that, because you know there was this $2 billion loan that the finance minister had worked on, and really that didn't get much of a mention, and it happened within the heat of the Delta Force issue. So it's good that you can now talk about this.
Absolutely. And in fact, I remember Gabi posted on Facebook that government has reprofiled this $2 billion thing.
Isn't this something that media should be interested
escaped everyone
about?
And of course, you can't blame us when you go attacking courts and you go and profile debt. How many people understand the debt anyway? So I'll talk about the attacks on their court. So it's understandable that we would focus on that. So it was important that he brought that up. And it was also important that he explained what this was meant for. Remember that last week there was a debate on the Super Morning Show between Kesela Tuforsen, former Deputy Finance Minister, and current Deputy Finance Minister Kweku Kwating, about the reasons why the cedi has, to use Evans Mensah's terms, has performed miraculously. The cedi has gained so much strength in value against the dollar, the major trading currency, the world's major trading currency. And there were questions as to what has happened.
It's just 3 months.
What has the cedi been fed with that it grew so strong and it performed so well? And the explanation offered by Kesela Tuforsen was that, look, the cedi is simply being propped up. This strength is artificial, and within the next 6 months, it's going to fall back to its proper level, which is it will fall again, because the strength gain was it was being propped up by this spectacularly high borrowing engaging by the government. And his argument was government had borrowed $3 billion in 3 months. And he said if the government continued in this borrowing spree, it was going to surpass the levels that the previous government attained, for which it was heavily criticized by this same MPP government, then in opposition. So it was important that Bawumia explained that, look, this money, quite to the contrary, wasn't borrowed and pumped into the system as we're being made to believe, which then propped up the cedi. A lot of the money was done to kind of take off some of the borrowing which had happened in the past, which had contributed to our debt, just take care of that debt, and then extend the period for payment of these debts. So we simply took the money, replaced our current debt with a long-term debt. So the short-term borrowing that we engaged in by the previous government, they took long-term borrowing to try and deal with that, and that kind of helped.
But there's the question of, isn't there hypocrisy that comes along with it? Because the current government in opposition accused the NDC administration of over-borrowing, reckless borrowing, terms like that were used, and the impression was that, well, when they came into office, we weren't really going to see this kind of borrowing. And if within 3 months we've borrowed in an attempt to reprofile and extend the debt, then what's new? What's different? It means we're still going to be living on these borrowed finances.
I guess the explanation they offer a lot of the time is, and Satepe made the same arguments when he was explaining the reasons why the borrowing was not too bad, about what you borrow for. If you borrow to retire your debt, to free yourself some space, it's better than when you have debt that you raise domestic revenues and you spend all of those domestic revenues in retiring the debt, which are long-term bonds, which were short-term bonds, which were issued at the time. So you take all your domestic revenues and you have to go and pay that, which then means that investment into the productive sector, which will generate more revenues and generate more taxes and generate more growth in the economy, is going to stall. So the explanation is take these long-term bonds, retire the short-term ones, so that when you raise domestic revenues, you can invest that in the economy and generate more revenues and expand the economy and generate more growth. So they will tell you that this is actually a more sensible way of managing the economy than just taking money and pumping into short-term borrowings for the past.
Smarter borrowing. Tekwe said smart. No, he said smart borrowing. This one may be smarter borrowing. Raymond, I know you wanted to say something.
The point to do with whether or not it is smart or not smart borrowing is what happens in the nearest future. If you actually make the economy and leave it worse off, we'll have to pay more for this particular debt structure that we are going to do with. It is the management and the goodwill in this particular case is that, and maybe good news is that this current government has a lot of goodwill. Investors and also even the international community trust it to be in the better position to manage the economy. So that's one good part. Now, the difficulty, however, is that we will still have a lot of debt on our hands we have to deal with over a period of time. I believe that if government was to service its debt in the nearest future, because we are in 2017, the 10-year period for our first Eurobond would have been this particular year, which by hook or crook ought to be paid.
750 million.
To dissuade our governments from being consistently in the mood of having the appetite to go out borrowing, I believe that if we had not gone this way, the government would have found money to fix this situation. Moving on, fix 20, what they call it, that one in 2019, and continue in that particular path. What I see is that we are postponing our woes if we don't fix the problem consistently. The bigger issue here is that we are just refusing to live within our means. Simple.
We are what? We are poor country trying to live like a rich country.
Simple. When we draw our budgets, we create the impression that we ought to actually put in some projects or continue with projects that are simply not needed at this particular point in time.
But Raymond, what kind of projects will that be? The reality is that we need roads, we need water, we need schools, we need health facilities. We need all these things at the same time.
But that's the difficulty. Any government prioritizes the needs. So you put your money where your most important needs are. For a government in our part of the world, you look at the basic essentials you have to provide. Government in Ghana have been too ambitious in getting into areas it's not supposed to be in. For example, government is more interested in being in charge of creating direct jobs. So not even necessarily going to create, so YEE is currently existing. We are going to pump money into YEE and create the impression that it is government's responsibility to form these other groups, oil and other people who are supposed to be, rather than giving the stimulus package to the private sector to do that particular job. So when you want to be overbearing in that particular sector, then you need more money to do that. Stay out, create the conditions for the system to work, then all of this will be taken care of. I am not convinced because I see this. Listen, the amount of money you are borrowing, unless it's going into productive ventures, and I don't see that happening at all. Because what happens over the period, and for example, the previous government boasted of the Sankofa and other projects as some of the amount of money borrowed. But we also know that he used some of the amount of money to do other things that were not in the nearest future going to actually give us any direct benefits. So if we have resolved that we are only borrowing for production, that's good. But when you are borrowing to now later on pay salaries, show up failing systems like the NHIS, which will be needed at a point in time, that means that we are not doing the right thing, because there is no way at the end of the day we are going to get the money back, or the institutions that are going to be directly involved are going to get the money and put in the economy, which will generate the resources you need. So in 10 years' time, we'll come back to discuss the same debt profile of the country, and we may need to extend that particular debt again if we don't deal with it decisively once and for all. And the solution is living within your means.
If I just add to that, if the figures put out by the government itself is to be believed, the expectation is that this year alone we're going to make interest payments on loans alone about 7
Not even the actual money, interest.
No,
Yes,
interest payments alone about 17 billion.
Yeah.
So if you're making interest payment alone about 17 billion in 1 year, because last year we paid 10.5 billion on interest payments. This year we are paying 17 plus billion on interest payments alone. If you have a total budget which is about 44 or 42 point something billion, if you have, this is what you're targeting to raise, and you are making interest payments alone in the region of 17 billion, you have a big problem in your hands. So it's completely understandable why the government will seek to delay this by take long-term bond, deal with this, because this is an immediate, if you don't pay, you are going to be flagged as defaulting on your loans, and you don't want that to happen. Of course, and yet...
And your credit rating will drop.
Absolutely, and yet during the campaigns, you made promises that you ought to fulfill, and yet there are obligations that you ought to fulfill as well. So how do you balance the two? So take long-term shots, long-term bonds, deal with the short-term ones that we're taking, so that you free yourself some space in the hope that the economy will grow, then you can deal with them going forward. And I share Raymond's view. If you don't deal with this systematically going forward, you are only postponing the problem.
It's just going to be a vicious cycle. Every, what,
so
3 years or 5 years, then we have to be paying off whatever debt.
Yeah.
You remember the 2007 bond? We were told that it's 10 years.
Yeah.
10 years is very far from now. And in 10 years' time, we would have fixed the economy to the level that we will not need to go in this direction again. This is our 10th year.
Yeah. Anyway, but Dr. Bawumia talks about them having a functional economic management team that they meet often enough. They have their eyes on the issues, their feet on the ball. So I guess we can only hope that things get the jokes that people crack that when NPP came into office in 2000, later on the cedi became 1-to-1 with the dollar. So if you have any dollar now, hurry up and change it, because the dollar is going to drop.
Okay, there's one more point of the economy, forgive me. I get the impression, and let's not forget, the budget was read on the 2nd of March. We are on the 17th of April. This is too little time for any major change to be made. I am not quick to attribute the current, what they call it, cedi performance to the current government. I am equally not quick to attribute the decline in the inflation to the current government. I believe that government economic policy, if
previously
this current government economic policy, if anything at all, would not show the fruits that we wish to see, except they are extremely short-termist right now. Because unless, and the Bank of Ghana China has failed terribly, unless we've been told that money was directly pumped in, unless we've been told that we're able to push down the kind of speculation that pushed up the cedi, aside the fact that the cedi goes through a cyclical process. This is the first quarter. All the pressures from last year have been heaped into our first quarter. It will ease off within this period till we get the, what they call it, coming in, then we have a very strong cedi. By November, we are going to import more for Christmas and the other things. So that cyclical part is also part of it. I am not, because, and of course, government has to show something it has done within a period. But if there is change along the line, I hope it will not be that it's the same policies that we will be blaming. Because indeed, in reality now, I can see very little impact on a March 2nd introduced policy or budgets read. We're recently told, Mustafa Ahmed just said last week that monies have been released for their engagements, just what they call it, the previous week. It only means that real work by the various ministries
hasn't started.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
that's
one
thing
I want us to also look at. So these are the dynamics that can also... So inflation could yo-yo. We could see it come down but go up. And
so I'm not so confident.
Okay, we need to quickly move away from the economy. A few other issues.
And I
know the economy is always, the bread and butter issues are always important for
we shouldn't be too overly excited about this, because it may change, except to emphasize the point he raised earlier about the role of confidence in the performance of the currency, inflation, and all of those ones. Because a lot of the time, and it's happened with all governments, when there's a change, there's a certain euphoria that comes with the change, and there's a certain renewed confidence and belief and hope that, look, things will be done better.
It won't be business as usual.
Absolutely, and the budget as it was presented actually signaled that it was progressive. So all of that would have fed into a certain renewed hope that things will be done better, that there will be real change. And so that may have influenced some of the results that we are seeing. Okay. But they can't claim sole credit for it.
All right, so I guess we'll still be watching the economy. I guess the three of us will be here watching it for as long as it takes. But let's now talk about an issue that had, dominated the headlines over the last 2 months, and is the subject of illegal small-scale mining, popularly known as galamsey. Vice President Bawumia addressed this issue. Let's hear him talk about the suspension of licenses for small-scale mining for now, and banning of mining in water bodies.
Suspended the issuance of small-scale mining licenses so that we can restructure the sector. We've developed a 5-year multilateral mining integrated project to improve the management of small-scale mining, to protect the environment, but at the same time to allow Ghanaians to mine in a regulated and sustainable manner. So under this 5-year multilateral mining integrated project, we will be identifying prospective areas for small-scale mining, where we will then direct the small-scale miners to those particular areas so that they are not just mining haphazardly. But when we direct them there, we know that we've already prospected and there is gold or whatever in that area.
I, Nana Addo Akufo-Addo, having been elected to the high office of the President